everybody, and welcome to the Don't Be Mad podcast, your weekly dose of the homies kicking back. And this week, we got ourselves a guest. I'm your boy Matthew, aka Lefty Lucky, and I'm joined here as always with
Jamali
and Jason. What's up?
And as I said, we got a special guest. He's actually going to be running as a part of the People's Party of Canada for the Mount Royal municipality. One of my good friends for a pretty long time now, Zack Lozoff. Give you a nice little clap it up, buddy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, the way we usually kick it here, we like to start off by asking each other how the week is, how's the mental health. So, as always, how was your week? How was your mental health, gentlemen?
wasn't too bad, you know what I mean?
Way to pry away from your phone, Jamali.
Yeah, I tried, man.
You're on brand as usual. I love it.
All I could do is try.
All you could do is try. Is that how your week was? You just been trying this week?
Damn right. This weather got me trying because it's been trying me.
What about you, Jason?
I mean, good, man. Can't complain. Chilling. Same as usual. Yeah, I'm good.
Nice. As for myself, yeah, it's been pretty good too, you know? I feel like I'm officially over the sickness. It's gone. It's purged. It's out of the system.
Sickness.
Yeah.
Dude, it wasn't the zombie apocalypse.
No, it wasn't a zombie, but like I was sick like 2 weeks ago. I got like messed up during the podcast. Like I started feeling sick, and then for like almost 2 weeks, it's been like in my system, and now it's like finally going away.
Well, it hasn't gone yet. It's on its way out.
Well, I'm still a bit like nasally, you know. It's always, you know, the congestion's always like the last thing that kind of fuck
didn't
off.
help, you know, in the cold.
It might not have helped, but it was the last one, so I had to go.
Well.
What about you, Zach? How's it been?
Can't complain. Keeping busy, that's for sure.
For sure, you definitely are. So, I don't know how these guys want to kick it off, but I figure I'd just like open the floor to you a bit just to like let people know exactly about your party, about your plans of like running for Mount Royal's municipality under the People's Party of Canada. Like, what's kind of the vision? What's been going on with you in this circumstance?
Sounds good, bro. I guess I'll introduce myself and we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
For all the listeners, my name is Zack Lozoff, and I'm the People's Party of Canada candidate in Mount Royal. I graduated from McGill in Health and Social Services Management, and I've been working at a hospital setting for almost 15 years now. I became interested in politics a little later on in life, but quickly took a shining to it. With the opinions I've had as of late, I decided it's time for me to actively try to do something about it. I've experience in lean management, and I would like to see a drastic cleanup of the federal government to make it run more efficiently with our money. As a founding member of the People's Party of Canada, I'm excited to finally have a platform I can get behind. I'm eager to share it with as many people as I can, and I'm happy to be here. I've known the guys around me for years, and I want to thank you guys for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Do you guys have any questions in particular before we get started, or any format you want to follow, or I want to suggest if you
Jason
guys want?
Jamal, if you want.
Jason's our political analyst.
He's always claiming he's the
he's
politics expert here.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Political Science.
Oh, I see. So you guys are just putting everything on me. Okay, I get it.
Hey, this might be your bag, yo. Get into it.
Yeah,
What can I ask you specifically about your party? Because I understand like I said, we're in the outside looking in. So from our perspective, what we see in politics today, we see a lot of people, you know, giving promises, and I promise this if I'm elected, I promise this if I'm going to be reelected, blah 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 blah. Same story and spill we always hear all the time. So it makes a lot of people skeptical on why they should vote for you specifically. What do you think your party can bring that's new and original as compared to the other parties?
I like it. I appreciate the question, bro. Different from the other parties, I think reasonably you could say almost everything. Looking at our platform, we're known to be drastically different than what all the other parties are offering at the moment. Goes hand in hand with, I couldn't agree with you more, that the other parties are out every single day promising more and more things to more and more voters. I think in the last month alone, they've made over $118 million in promises just in the past month leading up to the elections. And I look at those personally as somebody who's into politics, and I try to figure out where these numbers are coming from and how we're going to afford it. Some people don't give it the time of day to think about that. They just hear the promise and enjoy it. But I agree with you fully that even looking at the last election and the promises that were made and how many were kept, it's hard to trust a politician. On the other side of things, when I look at our leader and our platform, and you look at a lot of the promises that he made and makes, they're not so much about adding or having more of a fiscal cost. A lot of them have to do with cutting and bringing down the cost of our governments, which I think are much more realistic goals. Hopes for me right now, and if he gets elected, there'll be goals, and hopefully we can pull through with all of them.
Nice.
It's good.
Interesting.
All right. I have more questions, so don't worry about it. I have plenty more to come.
Hey man, like if you want to go for it, just go for it. Like,
No.
I'm not here to slow down anything. Like
Not all. Yeah, exactly. I assume we're going to get into it.
Yeah.
The way I sort of saw, I figured obviously we could discuss like the political landscape leading up to the election, where it stands
Definitely
right
that.
now, and how everybody feels. And then I've got a couple of stats about the economy I'd like to bring up. I have one policy in particular that I'd like to introduce because it's really important to me,
yeah.
and it leads directly into our foreign policy. And then I say we get into the meteor discussions, the immigrations, the environmental issues, the climate changes, all the fun stuff. Definitely have time to get.
Because I was literally
that.
just gonna say straight up, like, what exactly is the thing that you are basically making your cornerstone for your running? Because one of the things we always talk about here when it comes to politics, like outside of just looking at like the country as a whole, but like understanding the importance of your backyard being the thing that you need to focus on heavily when it comes to voting, like your mayors or your municipality leaders, things like that. You know, like obviously three of us are like NEG boys. You're an NEG boy yourself, but like you're doing your riding in Mount Royal. How do you feel like you can help the people of Mount Royal, even though it's not really like your home base, considering you're an NDG boy?
I feel like there's a couple different points packed in there. I hope I hit them all. I liked what you were bringing up about our own backyards and whatnot. I think in life in general, step one is to clean up your act. And I'm not talking to you personally. I'm talking about me myself. I'm talking as an individual. You clean up your own act, and from there you have the power. And when you say that, it doesn't mean that these issues are more important or less important or whatnot than world bigger issues.
No, for sure.
But they do give you the power to become a leader, to learn yourself and do better for yourself. And as you continue to do better for yourself, you are able to tackle bigger issues, take on more onto your plate at the same time, and go into the biggest sort of things. I think what's really important, looking at the federal government, the federal aspect, is that we elect a candidate in your personal riding so that is your voice towards the direct leader. Yeah. In this case, or right now, or up until now, was a direct link into Justin Trudeau, and for the future it'll be a direct link to the person. So hopefully you're electing not only a candidate in your own riding, but that'll give you a voice, but also a leader that will listen to that voice and listen to a candidate, an MP in that situation, once they are elected, and say, you know what, he's speaking for a certain area of Canada, and if this is an issue that's really important to Canadians, then it's an issue that should be listened to. And yeah, that's the party I'm engaging in. I have the confidence that our leader will take it that way. And if I missed any of your questions, sorry.
No, that's a good way to run. I liked how you answered that. Jamal, you got anything on your mind?
Not really. I'm not a political person, but I mean that could be a question. Like for someone like myself who see no direct benefit in necessarily participating in this political game. What would you say to voters who, like myself, who have that mindset, who feels like, their day-to-day is continuing regardless of who's in power, who's not in power, they're just going to go with whatever the flow is?
So like a skeptic mind?
Yeah, right. Definitely. I'll take your case in particular because that might be a constant feeling that a lot of people have of that it not really affecting me that much, or not at the moment affecting me that much. But we look at a government that just went through 4 years of drastically spending more than it ever has and brought us to a deficit that is almost unconscionable. And in those 4 years, we didn't really see a drastic raise in taxes. Right. So we haven't been paying off that deficit. So you don't feel it because we haven't had our taxes raised. Right. I don't know if you plan on having a kid anytime ever. I personally do. Right. So right now it doesn't affect me, but I'm already having a hard enough time putting the money together for me to buy a house. Right. It's going to be exasperated to the max by the time I have a children. He's old enough to be looking for a house. If he's paying much higher taxes than we're paying right now and nothing gets done about this, housing shortages between a mix of other problems. I want the Canada that my kid is able to grow up to one day to be the same Canada that I remember and as great as it was when we grew up, when you and I grew up.
No, definitely.
And that's economically speaking, that's speaking about how I treat you, you treat me. It's speaking in a very general way, but a move towards that is definitely the reason I got into politics. And I think that our party is is the one bringing a lot of my values or the values that I've seen in our country back to the table. So
Respect that.
Cool. Jason,
I'm back on the clock. Back on the clock.
are we on the clock?
No, I'm,
I know, like you were like nodding. I figured like you.
no, I'm making it a light mood and everything like that. So
have at her, bro.
no, okay, no. So I'm gonna get into the tough questions.
Yeah.
Tough questions, and
Hit me with them.
trust me. I know the difference between filibustering and all that stuff. So you can't get past me. I'm gonna ask you the tough questions. Tough
Wow.
questions.
Just ask your
Just ask
question.
the question.
Have at her, bro. I hope I have the answer for you. If I don't,
I know,
then,
if you don't- if
I'll
you
tell
don't, you
you.
don't.
I
You
won't
have-
be
you
winging
have
it, but
So-
I hope I do.
I'm the type of person that I'd never judge. I would never judge you or any candidate if it didn't come out your mouth and you didn't say it or a certain thing, or judge your entire party because of one person says. That being said, we saw your leader Maxime Bernier kind of go at the climate activist who came to Montreal recently, Greta Thunberg, and say that she was mentally challenged essentially. And my thing in regards to that is, how, as a candidate for his party, what would you have to say to that? And would you think that's a poor choice in words and a poor judgment to come out and say that, especially not just to say it to a person, but to say it to a child, essentially, who's trying to make the world better. And regardless if you think it's misguided or not, we all know that we can do better for the environment, and she's probably doing her best. But just to saying that to a child, do you think that was a little poor choice of words and poor choice of judgment?
I think it's exactly what you said. A poor choice of words. I know he made a second statement about it afterwards to try to clarify exactly what the position was that he was trying to state. I don't think that he was the one to bring up certain mental illnesses. I think it's a well-known part of our platform, but I don't think that justifies him. It still doesn't make it necessary given the comment he was making and the point he was trying to make. So I definitely think he could have made the point without referring to that. But regarding the climatism in general, or not climatism, but the whole stance on it, I don't know. I remember our childhood growing up with a lot of similar ideas with the global warming that we witnessed when we first realized that the ozone layer was developing a hole. And I forget her name, Miss Suzuki something, came to the United Nations in 1992 and delivered a very similar speech that Greta did and told us that we should be afraid that the earth is going to turn into an oven, and it never did. And to see them I guess they didn't take this child out of school, but first and foremost, I don't really support the idea of taking children out of school for drastic periods of time. I think that's probably the best place that they're going to learn a lot of things that they need to learn at a certain age.
Right.
I don't really see her advantage in the movement that she's making other than the publicity that she's getting, whereas I see a lot of people trying to take advantage of her movement and using it for their advantage. So again, I'm not trying to deny climate change in general. I mean, we know the climate changes, that's fine and dandy, but the explosive nature of what has become this Greta Thunberg movement is maybe a little bit unnecessary, a little bit too far, and it's getting a little
Exaggerated?
too exaggerated. Thank you for the word. That's the state I'm going, and we can get into it further if you'd like. I don't know if I answered your question properly, or if you want a little bit more meat on the bones.
No. You answered it enough.
Well, no, because like even to like essentially piggyback what you're saying, like when I heard she was going to be speaking at the UN, I was a little taken aback by it as well, because I mean, essentially, I had heard about the things that she was doing, like especially like sailing across the seas and everything like that. But overall, like I feel like her bringing awareness is great. And I mean, it's something that we all know that's really going on, but to the extent of using it for like this over politicized push that essentially it goes to the UN. And I mean, a lot of people refer to the UN as the United Nations of nothing, because not much gets done from them unless it's like just to bring like
unless it's on their
agenda.
warfare efforts to like help those who've been like war-torn countries and things of that nation. So I don't know. I felt like the whole situation, but where even when like the whole march was going on, like I didn't hear about it till like literally the day before, and just like the amount of people that were like, 300,000 people are just going to be marching. I was like,
that surprised me.
What exactly?
Bro, but we all know, like in our generation, it's just about being part of something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Half of those people don't even care. Like, if they really cared about the environment, half of them wouldn't upgrade their cell phone as often as they do, or the stuff they do, because that's part of the climate change, right? You know what I mean? And half of them just want it to be like, I was there when she was there. I don't find it that it's necessary, because we have people here in Canada, young teenagers just like her, who have been preaching about this, and no politician necessarily got behind them as much as they got behind Greta.
Exactly,
And I think, like you said, to your point, I think it's a point of like just exploiting the fact that she's willing to do this. And, you know, the fact that she's out of school for how long, bro? Like, she took her, a month and a half to travel across the ocean?
Let's think, well,
get here?
there was that, but even prior to that, like, her name has been around, I want to say, for at least since, like, end of winter.
Well, yeah, because she wrote the Pope that whole letter.
Like, she's been doing a lot of stuff where she's been traveling around and trying to either get meetings with people or speaking to people in like these various areas. So it's been like a consistent amount of time now that she's been out, I would assume, outside of just the traveling for the month and a half on the seas. Like, it's been a lot. And like, don't get me wrong, I think
this is a hustle. That's
it
what I think
is something that needs to be addressed. Like, we know the issues that are happening with climate change, and I mean, like, to a certain point, it's undeniable considering
Wasn't
how
Al
drastic
Gore
we've
addressing
seen
this
things
like
happen.
since
Big time,
early
a
2000s?
long time ago.
But that's
So it's
exactly
like,
it.
It's
It's
like,
one
why
of
do
those
you
things
need a
where
16-year-old or 13-year-old?
and the thing that
to
bugs
lead
me about it,
this?
I feel, is like she's just the next big voice they're using at the moment.
She doesn't have a voice. I think she's
But think about it. Like, you mentioned Suzuki back when we were in like elementary school,
Right.
going to the UN and doing. Then we had Al Gore having his talks
right.
about. We've had Leonardo DiCaprio
Yeah,
having
right.
talks about. Now we have her. It's like, once her voice kind of dwindles down, who's going to be the next one? I feel like it's just this chain.
What kind of gets me too is when they come out and they portray it and they say, "Oh, she's putting on this voice on this issue that needs to be spoken about." They allude to the fact that it hasn't been talked about for the last 30
But it
years.
has been, you know,
and it has
and-
been on the forefront of efforts.
I
and
feel like it's more a matter of, you know, it's something that we've spoken about before on here. When it comes to a lot of issues, how long are you going to talk about it before you're going to actually do something about it? You know,
Well, I like to point to that Jamali brought up. I want to bring up Autumn Peltier. She's right here in Canada,
Right.
making active.
and for years,
Yeah.
right? I think she's somewhere like 17, and she's been doing this for years. She's out in BC, a native young girl. You know what I mean?
And I find it gets overlooked by what's going on
They don't
right
get on
now.
her back and support her. So, like, to me, like, even like the bunch of people who went downtown, I think was like a 500,000. They said,
yeah,
something crazy like that.
maybe like that.
Like, what changes have they made in their life to affect change? Right? Like, that's the whole
What
premise.
change
of all
did this march itself accomplish, and what did it do towards the
Nothing.
The
Just
overall
messed up
goal?
my bus route. If I'm gonna be honest.
Probably
I
littered the
feel like
streets
that's
in the process.
one thing that, especially like for someone like me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, it's okay. Yeah, it's all fine and dandy to have this march that brings the awareness, but what are the actions that you're doing afterwards? You know,
There's
and
none, bro.
And I don't know. I mean, to go on this tangent now about this, I just feel like
I want to specifically thank you for both being so open-minded to the topic. I don't know if Jason wants to chime in on this, but I may be one of the first People's Party candidates to openly have a conversation about this and not be accused of being an climate change denier, which we've never denied at any point. But in the terms of this current political way things go,
I
is
know
like
what you
if
mean by
anybody
it, where
wants to
it's-
have a discussion like
Yeah.
we're having right now, it's like taboo. Don't talk about
Well, no,
it.
it's people who are basically like, if you're not happy and standing ovating these people for going out and marching,
Then you're a denier.
All of us, yeah, you're a denier. Where it's like, no, like we can sit here
a
and
large middle
we
ground.
see. We're not blind to what's been going around the world, where it's like the ice caps melting, things of that nature. Like, it's apparent that there is climate change happening and something needs to be done. But we can also acknowledge when there's being a spectacle made of climate change, and the gains of it aren't worth the efforts that have been behind that spectacle. Like,
My
well
whole
said.
thing on climate change, and we've had this discussion. I don't think there's nothing much we could do about it. I mean, we could pollute less, we could do all that, but I think it's just nature, right? We were taught that the world went through an ice age period, and now it's heating back up. That shit is just a cycle
well,
of life.
it's more so than that. Well, pollution, especially, like when you consider what's happened in the coral reef as a result of pollution.
Yeah.
You know, like things of that nature
I'm
are
not
directly
pollution
our
more
effect.
so
Right, pollution.
You know, that's
pollution is a
directly our
problem.
effect, yeah.
But you don't think like us having all these satellite out there to accommodate our life whether it's for communication purposes, all those things have an effect.
No, I'm sure it can have an effect as well.
I think something
That's
like
what
we need to pay attention to the bigger picture. It's not just about recycling. It's not about that. Sometimes it's just a course of life. And I think just like how, a couple of years ago, decades ago, you had like the whole AIDS epidemic, and it was something that the whole world got behind, and we still have AIDS problem. Mm-hmm. The same thing is going to happen in 50 years. They're still going to have climate change issue. I just think I don't think it's politicians. I think it's just the nature of things. There's going to always be something that they're going to use to be divisive. There's going to be things to use to appeal to our heart and have us get behind something. But at the end of the day, I think it's all of us to individually do our part to impact a positive change. And it shouldn't be about climate change. It should be us taking care of our home
issues
first.
in general.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we're cutting down trees and shit like that. Like it's nobody's business.
I think deforestation is one of the biggest issues on the climate things. What I want to say is I like basically a lot of things you said. Climate change, is most likely not going to stop.
Right.
I do think that there are things that we can do to try to slow it down or do whatever we can. I agree that there's measures we can take to try to do it, and I'm interested in exploring them. But it bothers me when scientists tell us that we know the measures and we know what they're going to do because they have no idea. They have no plausible solution to offer us. And I find when they tell us, oh, we know for a fact it's 100% CO2, human-made CO2, and this is how we're going to battle it. And even your own models can't even prove that you know what to do to battle it. And like you're really putting all your eggs into one area. You're neglecting the fact that there are so many other factors in climate change. I can name a couple. I'm sure we'll get into it a lot later. But it's just so negligent of all the other factors that could happen. And I don't know.
I mean, you're going to have the vegans are saying, well, hey, takes more water to raise a cow and all this type of shit. It's like a bunch of stuff. Like people are just putting it and pinpointing it to their own advantages or whatever they're trying to stand behind. And obviously, I think the obvious thing is pollution. We're really over mining. Like we're really extracting a lot of shit that could have an effect. We're sending rockets every couple of months to outer space. That could be a problem too. Like, and we need to look at the bigger picture. Like, there's a lot of things we can do individually, and it would have somewhat of an impact. But the whole, they're trying to make it seem like we should just, revamp everything. And, I mean, I don't think it's possible, so.
And, what really gets to me is the position they take in order to do that, where scientists studying space will tell you, we have no idea about X amount. We know maybe 10% of space or whatever quote. Scientists covering the oceans will tell you we know even less about the ocean than we know about space. There's so much ocean. And yet these people will tell you we are solidly sure that we know everything, and yet we cannot produce a climate model that can last over a year or 2 years, that actually works. And
I'm with you on
people
that.
eat up their opinions and say, like we talked about before, oh, well, if you don't stand and clap for these people, then you're some sort of denier. Like, no, but they're not. They're not bringing any solid arguments to the table. They're not backing themselves up with anything.
We're an emotional society, not a logical society, bro.
Unfortunately.
All right. Well, to move it from the environment, we actually have a question from the audience.
I love it.
Basically, they want to know, how does your party plan to address immigration in Canada, or specifically for us in Quebec?
Sure.
Alrighty, I'd be happy to cover a little bit of immigration for you guys.
I want to hear your answer, because after
I'll give you a quick one, and then
after
I'll
I have
just
a rebuttal
direct
after
questions.
I have a rebuttal. He didn't even say
He already has his rebuttal prepared.
A rebuttal from
whatever you're about to say.
That's how you plan. But that's
Whatever you say, I'm the contrary.
I'm coming at you.
Listen, you have to plan 10 steps in ahead for what people are going to say. That's always how it works.
Just let him speak.
Of course.
I'll throw this out there in a nutshell. Are you and I going to be talking like direct numbers or principles and ideologies?
Maybe, but you could see,
Alrighty,
depending on your answer.
So what I got on behalf of the People's Party, and what I'd like to show to the people, is that right now about 55% of our immigrants are what they call economic immigrants. And you guys can Google that. It's not a problem.
No problem. I understand what you're saying.
However, that number, including to our statistics, it includes the spouses and the dependents of the economic worker.
Right.
So the real percentage is actually far lower, especially since over the past few years, Justin drastically increased the number of parents and grandparents coming in under reunification, which is not helping our aging population by any means.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So our leader, Max Bernier, say his name again out there, came to the number 26%. I don't have the info right here to break that number down for you, or break the calculation down. I can contact them, but I won't be breaking that down right now. But in general, I'm going to say that our goal is to increase that percentage up closer to 50% ideally, but anything on the way up we think would be a good thing. So people can debate Max's calculation, I'm sure, but again, I think the concept of trying to keep that number up in terms of how many come in, successfully immigrate into our society, take on jobs, and are living a good life versus how many are currently on social services or whatnot. Keeping that ratio up, I think, is important. So to answer the question directly, and probably the way that it's been covered in the news, is yes, our plan involves taking in less non-economic immigrants. We understand that the other parties do not want to engage in the conversation, but we do believe that there is a difference between people coming from other continents and people coming from the United States. If you're leaving the U.S., your life is not in danger. You're not fleeing persecution. You're fleeing Donald Trump. There are good people who have been waiting on lists to be accepted into Canada for years, and it's not fair that they're being set aside. Furthermore, we believe that there are countries in need of real help, and our aid programs should be based on that, not the geographical ease to walk across our border. For information regarding dealing with the United States, I invite you guys all to go look at the platform online. There's more information on it. But to say it bluntly, the People's Party of Canada is for immigration. We believe a conversation about the economic sustainability of a successful long-term immigration plan is a discussion that must be had on the federal level, as it will ultimately benefit all the parties involved. Now I'm ready for your rebuttal.
That's a good question. That's a good answer, actually. Sorry, that's a good answer. I'm going to go into a little bit of histrionics because...
Did you say histrionics?
Yes.
We're getting creative over here.
Go for it.
No,
I like it.
Because as a child of an immigrant, and when my parents, and I'm sure for Jamali's parents, Matt's parents, same thing. Grandparents, same thing. Our parents they didn't have much when they came to Canada at all. And because of the policies at the time, which was Justin Trudeau's dad, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Prime Minister back in the time, because of the openness and of the government at the time, not necessarily letting in any and everyone into the country, but I remember at the time there was a lot of conservatives. Well, not at the time, but because history, I had read through history that a lot of conservative thinking was like, oh, if you let these people in, they're gonna either sell you the country, dirty up the country, make it like a cesspool. Everyone's gonna be on welfare. There is truth to that part, but there's like a 10% truth to what people are saying. And the thing is that from what I've seen in letting in the people who need the help, it's not necessarily that, especially for the Liberal platform, that they just want to let in anyone, but they want to let in people who are, really in need. If you have the means and you're coming from a different country, I agree with you for the thing for the United States, that if you're walking across the border, your life is not in danger, you should go back. Because you're not in danger. You're probably in danger from ICE coming to get you from the States, but that's essentially it. However, what I'm seeing, especially from and we see this from the local the Quebec from the Quebec government, they want people from more, you could say, European countries to come over, instead of like you have people from Africa coming over, people from Haiti coming over, people from the Caribbean coming over. And for me, it kind of touches on a level that's kind of, you're pandering to people who could actually make a financial contribution to the country, instead of people who actually need the help. And this is what I'm seeing. You correct me if I'm wrong or not, but I was getting back to my parents now. If that opportunity wasn't afforded to my parents, if, for example, I say like your policy that you want to implement goes into effect, people like my parents or Jamali's parents or Matt's grandparents would have never had the chance to come here in the first place. And we wouldn't be your friend. You wouldn't even see us. So this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about, because that part of that platform bothers me.
I'd love to. I'm sorry you feel that way, first off, and I'd like to try to do my best to address it for you. I'm not sure what the exact plan was when any of your past generations came in, and whether it was economically set up that they fit a certain standard or whatnot. So I won't speak as if I do, but I think at one point there you got a little bit mixed up between the economic immigrant and the non-economic immigrant. We do want to increase the percentage-wise and the ratio of them. The easiest way in doing so right now with the waiting list that we have would be to decrease the non-economic ones, which is why I brought up the issue in the States. But the adhering to bringing in only Europeans is an idea that it's the first I've heard of today. Actually, what we bring up in our platform when we say people who need it is people more looking into the Middle East and looking into certain Arab countries where Christians, Jewish people, and even Muslims who are not of the same Muslim faith of the people or the countries around them are being treated barbarically. Their lives are being threatened, and they don't have a country directly next door to them that they can walk to, that they can go for help. It's not like an American that can walk here and take it. And our specific, our beef with what's going on right now is really the Third Country Act that we signed with the United States that essentially opened up our borders to allow them to walk through, and basically lets Canadian officials say, well, you can apply for whatever you want to apply for after you come, but you can come in right now. We just don't think that that's a good way to be running our borders. But I do believe in humanitarian aid. I do think that definitely we need to help countries where aid is needed, where the people are needed. But I think that the average Canadian right now thinks that we're doing that on a much bigger level just because Justin says, I'm going to increase the amount of immigration. Whereas he has increased the amount of immigration. I don't think he's helped drastically more people from those countries. I think we have stats about the amount of Americans coming to Quebec alone, which I've seen in how it affects our healthcare system.
But
Well,
that
I just
wait,
have
hold on a
one
second,
thing to
Jamal,
add.
hold on a second.
Go ahead.
That argument for the health thing, excuse my French, is kind of bullshit, because health in the States right now is ridiculous. No one could afford it except the ultra rich. And because the reason why they're coming over here for the healthcare system is because, yes, they probably can't afford what's in the States, but yeah, they can afford what's over here because it's by far more affordable. So it's not necessarily about when you're coming to putting on a strain. That's more of a U.S. policy and U.S. economics that are driving people to Canada to come get medication and prescription medication.
Medication prescription is definitely one thing on the other side of healthcare, and I feel like they've been wanting it for a long enough time that any opportunity they have, like an open border to come get it, they'll probably take advantage of. My experience in the healthcare sector on our side, and what I've seen when I used to stop by the walk-in clinic one times a day when we first took a mass immigration, I'm not sure exactly what the year was, but I remember it was all in the news. That's when we opened up the Olympic Stadium.
2017,
and let them all in.
2016, 2015.
And
around there.
I saw somebody at the walk-in clinic, a Canadian, who didn't have their Medicare card on them. I don't know if they forgot it. I don't know if they lost it. I don't know if it expires. But Medicare, which is something that you consider as a Canadian right, that you guys have the right to do, she didn't have her Medicare card on her, and she was denied service unless she paid. She was served a bill for her healthcare services here in Canada. Behind the person giving her, explaining to her that, there was a gigantic sign saying, if you tell us that you're a refugee, you don't have to give us any paperwork whatsoever, and your bills will be 100% taken care of.
I hope that's factual.
Pardon me?
I hope that's factual because I know.
I
was
was
happening.
standing there and I read the sign myself,
when-
so
because
it's factual.
That literally was happening.
and I don't see the equality behind that. I must say I don't.
So,
this is. No, go ahead, Jamal. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I listened to you guys speak, and I could agree with some of the stuff you guys are saying, but one part of it, like, we have to remember, like, Canada signed on with other countries to provide and to be a safe country for humanitarian and compassionate reasons. So, by virtue of them signing on to that, they're allowed, they have no choice but to have open borders. And let's not get it misconstrued. U.S. citizens are not coming to Canada. They'll be turned back. The U.S. is not a place where they're in danger. So any application of refugee or humanitarian act will be refused. So it's not U.S. citizens. You have a lot of people coming over, and where you're referring to is the Rocks and Road situation. These people are coming over, people who have made applications in the U.S. and were denied. And so they're looking for a safe third country. Canada being the way it is, not going to go to Mexico. They come up here, they're going to get accepted. And we do have a due diligence because we signed that act. I think it's somewhere in the 1970s. We have the right to give them what we call a fairness trial. So we have to accommodate them. And obviously, due to the long list of them, we're obviously, it was supposed to be 30 days according to the law, but now obviously it's pushed over.
Yeah, there's a backlog.
Right? Backlog.
Yeah.
Terribly wrong. Should they cut people off? It's hard. You in a system that such as what Canada has, you're gonna have people who are gonna try to pull one on the system. You're gonna have people who really need the help. Me being an immigrant, immigration policies are necessary, but also have to look at it from a taxpaying perspective, right? We can't burden the system because it's just not logical. Like when Justin brought in, I think, with 120,000 Syrians, I'm not against that. But then you have situations, if you guys remember in 2011, or maybe even before that, when Hezbollah went in and they had this whole issue in Lebanon, you had a bunch of Lebanese Canadians who were outside of Canada. They were collecting whether welfare, pension, all of these things, which is illegal. And Canada had to spend over a couple million to get them out because they're Canadian citizen. We had to go and get them retrieved from that danger zone. These are the exploitation within the immigration system I would want to see get addressed. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily like finding barricades or, I agree with you. Economic immigration is necessary. They have immigration programs that are in place to do that. They should increase the numbers. But with all this influx of refugees, which we understand, it's hard for them to do that. I mean, I think last November they decreased they closed down the program for people who want to come here, and they've had an agreement with the Philippines, I believe, where you can come in as a nurse and a nursing assistant and provide healthcare services, and you stay with your employer for 2 years, and you can apply for your PR. And that program was there for about 5 years, and then they end up closing it out. Here in Quebec, you had the entrepreneurial policies where you could come in, buy a business, and hire at least one Canadian citizen. And after a couple of years, you could apply for your PR. The problem with that is you have one guy who would buy it, him and his family come in, they do what they need to do, they get their paper, he sells it to his brother, and they do that for years. So it's like these systems where the system's getting abused, I think is the most part of the immigration policies that need to be addressed. It's not about how much people we let in, it's about how these people come in and whether they're taking advantage of the system or they really need help. There's people who definitely need help, but we have to provide them a fair trial. And so, irregardless of whether we know they're lying from the beginning, we have to investigate. It's going to cost money. And while they're waiting for this process to go through, taxpayers are paying for it.
Exactly.
Because they need places, you know what
exactly.
I mean?
I mean, I agree with you fully. I would never want to deprive somebody of help that they need.
Right.
That's not the goal whatsoever, the thing. But what we would want to stop is people who are in other countries looking for help, who apply to multiple countries,
right,
and then get their responses, and then pick which country they'd rather go to afterwards to pay, dependent
right,
on where they're basically
right,
citizenship shopping is what they call it.
Right.
So you apply to multiple places, you see what your best offer is, and if we get Canada, we get Canada.
Well, I mean, Canada is seeked out because, like in Germany, for example, no matter how long you live there, you'll never get PR. And Germany always look to what they call, I forgot the exact words, but their goal is to get your country back up and running so that you can go back there. They're not looking to keep you there. So if you're a child, like just like in the Emirates, if you're born to Pakistani parents in Dubai, you're never going to be an Emirati. You know what I mean? Their citizenships are limited. But also, just to be fair, like you cannot be a refugee in England and come here. It's because England is part of the safe.
If they're already
country.
Able to help you,
right?
Yeah,
so
then why?
Those are the things that we need to understand. So when we get those type of situations, those things are not burden to the system because they're easily filtered out. What's a burden to the system is people who really come in and know how to manipulate the system.
So if the Quebec government can say with certainty that over 40,000 people have come over illegally since January of 2017,
right,
and they can look at it and say the average deportation is going to take us about 2 to probably 3 years per person.
Yeah.
That's how long it's going to take.
Absolutely. If they're able to find that person.
So like you said,
right?
The taxpayer is basically going to pay that bill for 3 years if they find them.
Right.
But do you think that the Quebec government, their numbers are credible? Remember, this is the
Absolutely.
same... Well,
absolutely.
This is
I mean, you had people crossing over Roxon Road in the summertime by the boat. They were given direction in Plattsburgh on how to get to Roxon Road because it's not a well-known place. And the thing about it, you can't stop them, right? Because we signed that act. So you have to let them cross. Then they infringe on the Immigration Act. Then you have to arrest them. You have to process them. You have to release them. They have to come back in 30 days and do all the necessary paperwork. And then, unfortunately, you have to find them some sort of legal counsel. It's a heavy burden.
I mean, it sounds like we actually agree on
I agree
most
with you.
aspects
Yeah.
of
It pretty much sounds
pretty
like you
much
guys are on the
everything.
exact same
but
page
like
with
again,
this.
what I'm saying is I think most people who hear about immigration thinks of it as like, oh, people are just coming in and freeloading and this and that. Some people really don't have a place to go. And I think I'm happy that Canada has an open policy as such. I don't want to see that change. I just want to see that they have systems that are in place to avoid the abuse.
I hear you.
So,
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you said it very, very well. I think Canada benefited greatly from the immigration that's had in the past years, and I think it will benefit greatly from immigration for years to come. Hopefully, that's the plan.
Most definitely.
Is there any, do you have anything like against when looking at my actual policy? Is it the idea behind the percentages or the ratio of economic to non-economic, or is it just sort of the process of looking through the non-economics and the cuts that would need to be made? That's more.
I kind of go along the lines what Jamal was saying. I don't mind the people coming in or anything like that. You just need a better process in getting them processed, either coming into the country legally and getting them set up, or if these people don't need to be here, get a quicker process to get them out as quick as possible. Because as much as there was a lot of people coming in that past summer, there was a lot of people getting turned back during that time as well. I remember going to around Bonaventure, downtown Montreal. I saw them waiting in a line, a whole bunch of people, and most of them got turned away. Majority of them got turned away. And
but there's also an appeal process, right?
Yeah, the appeal process.
So because you have to give them an issue of a fair trial, they have the right to appeal.
That's fine.
And
that's fine.
That's not a problem. Like, to me, it's not even them coming across the border, the whole backlog. It's really and truly, there's ways that things could be done and could be done efficiently and where dollars are not wasted. I think for a lot of politicians, they agreed to have these things happen because it's a way they could siphon a few dollars on the side.
But how do you feel about just like point of entries in general? I personally would assume that no matter any country I've ever been to or intend on going to, I plan on going through their national port of entry and letting them know that I'm coming. And if there's a lineup, I'll wait in line. That's all there is to it.
Right, but you're saying that as a Canadian
with money,
as someone not just with
no,
money.
I'm saying that on a national side of how do you think a country should treat its borders? Should they be open to, oh, you know what, come across and we'll figure out the paperwork later, or should they have a bit of a concentration on, you know what? I hope there's not a line. We'll try to gear the lines to as low as we can, but we should try to have some organization in how we're going to go about this.
Well, I mean, whether the aspect with the whole thing with Roxon Road, and it's not just Roxon Road. Roxon Road is the one in Quebec. There's one in Winnipeg. There's one in Alberta, where literally there's no border. Like, there's no fence. There's no border patrol. Like, one side is Canada, the other side is the U.S. And you have a lot of countries in Europe like that, right? I think the problem what we have is obviously the system of fear. So when Donald Trump got elected, everybody got up in arms and everybody rushed the border. I think those type of things, that's more on a global level, right? So I think that's one thing. I think also people seek out countries that they know are accepting. And me being who I am, if I was in anybody else's position, I wasn't going to look, if let's say I was in Syria and I see how they're treating me in Europe, man, if I could make it to Canada, I'm coming. You know what I mean? Because we're accepting people, right? Sure. So like you expect that. I think the way we should treat the border is have, like, I'm not saying put up a wall. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying closing off these things. And I think Roxon Road is just a mere example of, it was organized. It wasn't like it was chaotic and you had a bunch of people just rushing it. There were people there processing. There's immigration officers waiting, welcoming these people. You know what I mean? Treating them right. They set up tents out in Granby at one point. So it wasn't like they were treated like criminals. I don't think we should treat them like criminals. The thing is, too, it's like, if they don't have a car, what are they going to pull up at the border on foot? you can't. It won't work.
You can walk over.
They do that.
Yeah, you can walk right up to the cardboard on foot.
You could walk. I'm not saying you can't. I'm
You saw?
saying
Do you remember what happened to the guy who walked over? He lost his hands. I'm not. It's not funny, but
Because he
his
did
hands
it on like
froze.
one of the coldest days in winter.
Yeah,
Right.
but again,
Yeah.
people have no choice. If you have nothing,
But the
that's
point
what
is,
they're gonna do.
Roxton Road was a safe point, and I wouldn't disagree to that because, like I said, there's people waiting there. There's school buses. They were getting processed right away, so it was efficient as opposed to have them walking, blocking traffic, creating a whole other slew of issues. So I'm not against that, and I mean, what other alternatives? I mean, there's also people coming every day by plane, right? People come by
Not
plane.
only by plane, but
By
at
boat.
the same border. Do you think that border itself is to this day being monitored the same way, or do you think it sort of laxed up after a big influx, and ever since people who know about it have been using it anyways? And
I think the thing is when people come in there, they're documented right away, right? So if they're coming in now and they're coming in on their own and they're doing all that, they obviously are malicious, right? Unless they come in and they go straight to 1010 Saint Antoine and declare their entry, then you could do that. You know what I mean? But like again, I'm not saying building a wall is going to solve anything, and I don't think it even probably goes against the treaty we signed back in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I'm not against people coming in. I'm just against the policies in which things are done and that burden the system. And obviously, there should be some burden on the system. We know that. But it shouldn't get to a
Not
point
to the
where,
extent that it's
where
been where
getting
our
right
deficit
now.
has gone so
which is
drastically up.
where I feel they need to talk about it. I actually feel like I've agreed with absolutely everything you've
yeah.
said so far.
bring
I
it
don't
into-
have anything to
bring it
deny
into
about
economy.
what
Yeah.
you said.
Yeah, it comes down about numbers, you know?
And it goes, but again, to bring up what I brought up at the end of the last topic we spoke to, is it's hard for PPC members to have a general conversation like this with the general public without being shunned upon
people-
as some sort of radical. And
'Cause
it's like,
people
yo, it's not
listen
a
to the
radical idea.
media.
It's just a conversation. It's and the idea to want to shelve a to discuss something. Why should anybody ever say like, no, this is not worth discussing? I don't want to hear your opinion because it's not even worth discussing. It's like, no,
But when
it
they're
seems like
not
a
educated
rational
on it.
conversation
that
for us
need
to
to
all
be had because they are directly affecting us no matter what
exactly.
we want to say about it. Like whether you are on that side that is, open the borders, let them in, we'll deal with it once they're here, or if you're on the opposite end where you're like, no, we need to at the very least bottleneck it, have like the entry points as you were saying, and have certain posts put in place that when they come, they go here, and we know at the very least we can keep a monitored eye on how they are being processed and that they're being processed efficiently and effectively. So when they are then either allowed or denied, we know the reasons why, and it's not a matter of we just flush them in and then it didn't work out, or flush them in and they found their way because they got lucky. It's good to have that process done immediately. Which is why I feel like, we've pretty much been on the same page as far as everything goes with that side of the immigration conversation.
Yeah, I'm just happy we're able to have the entire conversation. It's fantastic.
It's a good thing. I mean, I think it's a needed conversation. I think a lot of people are miseducated on a lot of things, and they listen to the media, and then they go crazy.
Well, the big
they're
picture,
coming in to take our jobs, and they're coming in to do... Nah, bro, cut it out.
obviously. But I was going to say is that words are our tools. The conversations that we have in places like this, especially with people who are critics of you or who have a different opinion from you,
But
it's
knowledge
through
is
having the
also
conversation
necessary.
directly with them and hearing their side and getting to display your side. That's how you get to the end of resolve a conflict.
But I can't have a conversation
Or
with
perhaps
you
not.
if I have no knowledge of it, and my only position is I'm opposed to it because of what I heard and not what I know.
And so I'm going to avoid having a conversation
Because I don't
and
wanna
it's just
expose
like,
my
no, the
ignorance.
conversation
Right.
exactly, but the conversation is what gets us further ahead.
Definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
Jason,
We could switch this up because I know you did want to talk economics. We lightly brushed on it, but
actually, I'll spit it out. It's just a
figure
few
we should
couple
get,
things.
a bit deeper into what
some food for thought.
your party has
and
going on.
Economics. I just want
We
to
can talk about student debt. If you can go forgive us about them debt, you good with it.
Blame your choices of school, Jamali.
What?
Blame your choices of school. Don't blame the debt. Blame your choices of school.
It is what it is, baby.
All right. So, talk numbers a little bit. We're currently $692 billion in debt. This is an amount that I don't even think we can conversate about and actually understand and
No.
respect. So I'll narrow it down, and I'm going to say just the interest payments alone on this amount are $26 billion per year. Just on interest. So to put that into perspective, we currently spend $6 billion per year on children's benefits, $4 billion a year on veterans, $4 billion on health care, and another $1 billion on natural resources and another $1 billion on the environment. So that's $16 billion I just mentioned. So we're spending $10 billion per year more on covering our interest payments on our debt than we're investing in all these 5 areas put together. So if any of you guys think that's properly managing a country, I would tend to disagree. But
a lot of these, like what Jason mentioned about Trudeau's father in the 80s, yes, it was good that he allowed a lot of immigrants, but his policies were stupid, bro. Like if you look back on some of his policies, it's what started this whole deficit building.
But running a deficit for the last 4 years and then promising a north of $10 billion deficit for every year of the next 4 years is not the direction.
Yeah.
No, it shouldn't be. No,
Quite the opposite.
It's not going to solve the problem.
Well,
No.
let me ask you a question in regards to the deficit. What do you think is a successful economy? And if you tell me it's not a deficit, you're absolutely wrong, because every economy that's successful has a deficit.
No, I'm not saying it's not a deficit, but I look at how people are taxed, what they're getting out of their dollars, how far their dollar can stretch them at the average store.
That I agree with you with.
And I think we could do better in a lot of those areas if we look at our federal government spending and eliminate a little bit of the waste around it in areas.
But
I think if the general Canadian or average Canadian can agree that the average Canadian is probably not benefiting from it, then we got to wonder why we're spending the money.
do you think that's more of a provincial problem instead of a because
I think the provincial, in that sense, I think the provinces have their own battles to be held, but I think on the federal level, there's definitely Canada-wide tax money.
The reason why I asked you if it's a provincial thing, because we saw during the Harper years that Alberta, for God knows how long, was making billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of profits. Ridiculous amount. They have one bad year, everyone's broke. Again, that sounds more of a mismanagement on a provincial level than it is actually something on a federal level. Because yes, I understand they were making a lot of money, paying off a lot of debts, Canada, and yes, Alberta, stop complaining. We know you've done a lot for Canada throughout the years. We get it. But you see things that in provinces like Alberta, you're making for over 10, 11 years profits. You had no debt, essentially no debt in the province. And how you have one bad sense. You don't have a rainy day fund is what I'm essentially trying to say. That sounds more of a mismanagement on the provincial level than it is on a federal level. And because of Alberta's oil, which dictates most of the economy for Canada, it goes with the dollar essentially right now. That seems more mismanagement on the provincial level when it comes to people being on welfare in Quebec, overspending in Ontario, not having a rainy day fund in Alberta. That kind of things seems more on a provincial level than it actually is federally, because all the federal government is doing, they're responsible for things, but they're giving money to the provinces for the provinces to spend.
Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't most provinces collect
equalization payments?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm saying it sounds more of a mismanagement on the provincial level, because
federally, we're the only party that wants to remove those equalization payments because we find it'll give the independence to the people who are currently used to having a handout.
Okay.
It was designed initially as a somewhat of a welfare program, which are generally designed to help you get onto your feet so you can learn how to do things you want. If you've been receiving them for over 50 years, they're not helping you grow anywhere. Exactly. So we kind of want to remove that. And looking at what you were just saying, Alberta wasn't receiving those payments all those years. And then I don't know the exact history, but I guess according to you, things happen. But a lot of the other costs that you brought up, those aren't cuts that we're looking at when we talk about our federal budget and how to limit them. Those are, I agree with you fully. They're, if not municipal, provincial, or sometimes even independent issues that you have to deal with.
Because I see those. I get the spending. I get it's a little bit out of hand, and everyone knows we have a high debt right now. However, I do see more people working than there were 5 years ago. I see more people making more money individually 5 years ago. And like I said before, I agree with you that taxes are still a little bit too high in regards, especially here in Quebec where we're paying 2 taxes. It's ridiculous. But I'm seeing more of an upward trend individually for people of the middle class, people who actually need to be working. And I don't see as much rich people getting richer. I see more people in the middle class getting, I'm not saying necessarily richer, but they're in a better place. They're a much better place than they were, say, 5-6 years ago.
I guess that one would be debatable. I
Yeah.
personally don't think the average middle class is doing that much better than they were 5 or 6 years ago. It's a part of why I'm getting involved. I think Trudeau would tout that we're doing a lot better, but I'm one of them, and I don't see what he's talking about.
Well, I think I have a question for you, and I think this ties in. I think my question is to you is what's going to happen with the interest rate? Because I think the reason why Jason and other people believe that the middle class is because we haven't raised interest rates in a
exactly.
long motherfucking time.
Which means a
And
lot of
when
the success
that
we're
shit
seeing is a
happened-
mortgage on our future.
Right. So when that happened, you're going to have a lot of default on mortgages. A lot of people are going to start declare bankruptcy, and it's terrible. So
But yeah, that's an individual's problem because if you're buying more than
No, it's not an individual
If you're
problem.
buying more than
No,
you
it's
can
if
afford,
the federal
It's the
government is
federal
hiding
government.
that deficit from you by not raising the taxes
Yeah, I
when they
understand
should, then
that,
it's
but
all of our
it'll
problems.
affect-
If you're
it'll
buying-
affect us all.
if you're buying out of your means, there's the same thing what happened
people,
in the States.
but people are buying. No, it's not the same thing. People are
Right
buying.
now, it's in their means.
It's
Yeah,
within their
exactly.
means
They think.
because there's no interest rate that's risen up or hasn't moved in I don't know how long. The moment that shifts a bit, even by 1/4%, all of a sudden your mortgages you can no longer afford.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous problem, which is different than the U.S. where they were buying and selling bad debt. It's a whole different story. So that's my question because I think a lot of people our age are looking to buy their first home, are looking to make investments, buying up whether it's just a commercial business or whatever the case is, and they're going to the banks for loans. What's going to happen? What your party's perspective on interest rate? Because the moment that shifts, you're tipping the scale. I think so.
Definitely. Oh, that's what we think too. So to be noted, we're the only party even looking towards balancing the budget within one term. None of the other parties even promise it or even think it's possible. To answer Jason's question, I think part of me wanting the government to be more lean, more efficient is something that Max says all the time, is that one of the first things our federal government should do when given a task or an issue is decide whether it's federal jurisdiction in the first place, or if this is an issue that should be done by a province, should be done by a municipality, or if we should encourage people to work these things out themselves. Because the more the federal government wants to get involved in those everyday decisions that we should be making as people or as provinces, it's a problem. We need the government to be smaller, less intrusive upon our everyday lives, and really only work on the stuff that is federal jurisdiction, makes a difference equally to all Canadians from out west to out east. Talking about lowering, when I say lowering our taxes, I'm talking about the federal tax. I'm not talking about the provincial tax. I understand we're not going to be able to solve a lot of the problems that the province is in by itself. But to talk about foreign policy, I'll give you off quick our stance. I'll make it real quick. But like we just talked about, as our national debt continues to mount, the liberal government devotes more and more resources trying to solve social and economic problems in other countries. It spends billions of dollars every year to help countries in Africa and Asia build roads and reduce CO2 emissions. The People's Party is here to lower the taxes for Canadians. So if elected, we will not get involved in foreign conflicts unless we really deem that there's a Canadian interest in doing so and we see a benefit in it. We would strengthen our relations with our main trading and defense partner, which is the United States. I'm not saying it would be easy, but it would be necessary. Definitely reduce our presence in the United Nations institutions. We talked about them a second ago.
Yeah.
Liberalize trade with as many countries as possible. That is what is going to ensure growth in developing economies. Open up free trade for them, let them start businesses where they can sell their products directly to us with no taxes associated. That's how we will encourage them to grow. And then in terms of really saving and on the international front, we would save billions of dollars by phasing out the developmental aid programs and focus Canadian international assistance on humanitarian action. So health crises, major conflicts, natural disasters, stuff like that. 100% we have foreign aid for that, for things that need it. But certain programs that I think you can look into right now, I advise you to look into the $4 billion we're sending to Africa or the almost $2 billion that we're sending in Asia for projects that you can honestly look at and say that we're not benefiting that greatly from, and we're paying annually for them.
My whole thing is, what do you? So you guys want your party envision having more businesses with the U.S., more trades with the U.S. Because I think that's from a person who don't believe in politics, right? But just in bare common sense, I have a problem with that, and I don't know. Maybe I'm being unrealistic. I feel like we're too dependent on the U.S. in terms of trades. Obviously, it's easy. We share a border together, so it's cost effective. But I think when it comes to trade, we're on the lower end of it. We're not getting the full benefit that we're getting. We're accommodating to the U.S. because it's easier to get our products there. But then also it interferes with our foreign affairs because if they have an issue, let's say with the Huawei situation we saw how all of a sudden we have to kind of back them because we want to protect our trade with them. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like Canada on a whole need, especially in this day and age, need to have some leverage on their independence. I think for far too long we've been dependent on the U.S. to sustain our economy. I think personally, I don't think that's a good look. I think that's very dangerous, especially when you have leaders like Trump. You know what I mean? I don't think Trump controls everything. I don't think he controls anything to begin with. But I'm just saying where the U.S. is going, I don't know, like, dismantling the free trade agreement, NAFTA, all these type of things. I don't think Canada benefits from all their relations necessarily with them.
Well, even like touching on the whole Huawei situation, we literally stepped in it when it came to that whole situation because we could have easily just, you guys have an issue with the president of Huawei being in Canada. Well, it's too late. She's already on the plane and she's gone.
Can't do that.
No, they easily could have and should have done that.
Even if she was on the plane, they would turn the plane back to get her
They
back.
should have just let her go because
it's a
when
treaty
they
we detained her for the U.S.
exactly,
purpose. And then the U.S.
they
turned
should have
around
never done
and
that.
said, "Oh no, blah blah blah," and they end up in discussion with
like
them.
they should have never detained her. They should have let her go. And look, you have your issue with
and
the
she
U.S.
wasn't even the president. She was the president's wife or something like that.
Like it was stupid on our part to detain her for something that we were not involved in.
Right.
Only because we have trade with the
US.
with the U.S. and they had issues, they did that. It was the dumbest thing.
It's
in the
an
world
agreement
to do.
they signed, though. It's an agreement. It's the same thing.
No, not in that case.
It is.
In that case,
I 100%
let her go.
guarantee you it's an agreement they signed
because she was on Canadian soil, not
doesn't
American.
matter. Doesn't matter. It's the agreement they signed. It's the agreement they signed.
No, but there's a difference. The agreement is on extradition.
Exactly.
If she did a crime in the U.S. and they wanted her, we have to extradite her to the U.S. But she did not commit any
She
crime.
did nothing here to be detained outside of being here.
And the U.S. knowing that she was here.
Yeah.
Like that type of policy, like to me, I think that's a dangerous game we're playing, especially on a global level. We have, globalization has changed over the past years, right? So we have easy access to a lot of things. I think we should try to run an independent game. Like I'm not saying cut off trade with the U.S., but we could see that they're acting in their own best interests when it comes to Canada. So I don't know. I don't know if I could back that policy of like building a stronger relations with them.
Well, we have to have some sort of relationship with
absolutely.
them. They are the United States. And I agree fully
Absolutely.
with you in the sense that when we walk, that we'll have our own negotiations with the United States directly. And when we walk into those negotiations, we should get the best we can possibly get for Canada. 100% we should.
It's damn near impossible
think,
for us to thrive here without having these trade relationships with the U.S. It's damn near impossible.
No, I'm not saying it isn't, but I think when it comes down to certain things, we need to also cultivate a lot of homegrown entrepreneurs. I think we need to put a lot of an infrastructure where we could support that. You know what I mean?
Agreeable,
I feel like,
looking at just the NAFTA agreement itself, if I'm not mistaken, we have the new one under Trump and Trudeau, and then we have the other one that was pretty much standard for a very, very, very long time.
Right.
And I think we were better under the original one.
Of course, by far.
So
we really were.
We lost the second round of signing, so we're not doing as well as we potentially could be.
Right.
I agree with you that hopefully we'd be doing the best we possibly could, and we'd be profiting off of the United States and making all sorts of money negotiation-wise. So I think that's realistic. Probably not, but I think we should strive for better than what we have, for sure.
Oh, for sure. And I think the only reason why we don't profit is because, it's sort of like, I feel like they see Canada as like, where else are they going to go? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to come to us before they go anywhere else. I think the moment you start going elsewhere, even if it's for the same or a little less, it forces them to now realize, hey, there's competition in the space.
Capitalism.
Right. So it's the game.
Open
they're
up the
playing.
markets,
Right.
open up free trade. The more competition there is, the lower the price is going to be. It's going to be
China's
good for
economy's
everybody.
Booming right now.
Big time.
Right. So, I mean, it's something I've looked at from that perspective, and I think it's necessary, especially moving forward, that the U.S. act in like the Kyoto Accord for even just like greenhouse, they refuse to sign it, even though Canada did. Like, so they're not really on par with
China
us.
didn't sign the Paris Accord either, and to look at the actual Paris Accord and to look, I mean, even the United Nations broke it down using their own climate models to see what it'll actually accomplish. If all I think I have it right here somewhere, that if all the countries
China got
that
the technology, bro. They were creating clouds during the Beijing Olympics.
Oh yeah,
That's when you know
definitely,
they
they know how to
gangster.
make it rain.
Don't need us.
They have weather cannons for sure.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. what I was
Basically, there are factories that are just pumping up the smog. They just giant fans in the air to push the smog to elsewhere.
Definitely, but I mean, to think on a global level, if on the CO2 emissions, what are our emissions relative to China's emissions?
Nothing.
And so to look at the Paris
We're not even
climate,
close.
like we're going to strive, and then to look at the costs associated to some of the measures being put in place so that we can strive to make these things for the Paris Accord, which A, is going to not do very much good over the next 100 years, even if we all make it. B, if China's not involved, we're basically, what are we even offsetting what
fighting
the
against
damage?
ourselves
Yeah,
in that-
exactly.
in that
If
Yeah,
it's
but
not-
we
if it's not
also, we also, as the westernized countries, have to take ownership. For a long time, China and India has been a dumping ground for waste, and that's where a lot of especially in India, a lot of pollution comes from them burning our waste. Like
Also, but you have to look at the size of their population
Yeah,
as well, and
their
you can't
population
assume
compared
that
to
these
ours,
people are going to
majority is
stay
their own
low and
waste.
stay forward. Like these people are going to grow. Their population's only going to grow. They're going to want to succeed. They're going to produce waste. They are
Right, they are gonna
100%,
produce waste.
at a higher rate than we are with their population.
What is it? Like
are you in
slightly above 1/3 of the population is within that small
Right,
section?
I'm not saying otherwise. I'm just saying when it comes to waste, the Western world consume a lot more than these guys. Let's keep that 100. There's no way you could compare, even though they're overly populated.
Consumption, I guess, could probably be argued,
Right, that's
but
what
they
I'm
have
talking about.
statistics about
Waste.
how much actual waste is coming
it's
out. and
definitely
it's-
them over us when it comes to
100%.
waste.
Well, of
Consumption,
course, you're
us.
dealing with a population like that, yes. But I'm just saying
Yeah.
our consumption is forcing their production. For example, the way we consume things, and
Well, that's why I said a carbon tax isn't going to do anything. You carbon tax a business, say, oh, you're going to put out more carbon, we're going to charge you more. They're just going to factor that into the price of whatever they're
There you
selling.
go.
Exactly.
They're not going to change.
But
They're not
then
going to
again,
say, oh, I'm going to sell less and
we
make
have-
less money. Like, no, they're going to sell more, make more money, and charge more.
and that's why we, as the Western world, have to change our mindset so that we don't have to consume as much, so they don't produce as much. You get what I'm saying?
I fully get what you're saying. What our party really wants to promote and send out there, why we're being called climate deniers because we won't jump on the whole Paris Agreement and everything, is I think a great example is Tesla. You look at Tesla, takes all the patents away from the work that the science that he's put up,
Right.
allows people to open up these patents. Other car companies can take these patents, make electric cars, and start competition in the industry. Once there's competition in the industry, I don't know if any of you guys have noticed more Teslas in the last year than there were
Yeah,
8 years
a
ago on
lot
the road,
more,
but there's
right.
a lot more on the
A
road.
lot more
Right.
Teslas.
Well, there's a lot more affordable
Affordable
Teslas.
ones,
on
That's
the
what
road.
I was about to get at. As
That's
the
it.
competition
They're there.
increases, you have to bring the price down. As the price decreases on something like a Tesla, when you go to buy a car, if all of a sudden the Tesla is within the realm of what you are going to pay, a lot of people would prefer to make that choice.
Yeah.
100%. And then you see a movement, a lot of Teslas on the street. This is what naturally makes the world a better place, running on these
Right.
electronic things. You could say the same thing. 20 years ago, when they first developed the LED light, if you were to walk into somebody's house and tell them, listen, I have a light bulb for you, it's going to last you 100 times what this one does, but it costs you 50 times the amount or 75 times the amount. Nobody's going to say I'm spending 50 times the price on a light bulb. Not a chance.
right.
I can't do it. But if you get the science down to the point where that technology is an economic alternative to what the people are already spending, and they can see the use of the good in it, then they'll make the decision themselves. You don't have to force it. You don't have to have a carbon tax where you force your people to do something and ultimately it does no good in the end of the day.
Yeah.
You make the alternative economically viable for the everyday user. man, we could ban plastic straws here. We could ban them in San Francisco. We could do it all in North America. But if they don't ban plastic straws or one-use plastics in China, it's not going to change a huge. And I'm not saying we're not doing something good. We will be doing something good, but it's important to understand the difference being made. Whereas there will be no forcing them to make that change. But if you can walk into any of their houses and propose to them a paper straw and say it lasts the same amount of time, it's going to cost you the same amount of money, and it's not made with petroleum. You're not putting this in the system. You're not putting it in the ecosystem afterward. Everybody's going to jump on board. Nobody has a problem with that. But it's the economic cost to a lot of these alternatives that is just way behind the game right now, especially on a larger level. On a big scale, the green alternatives are not cost efficient. They're way more expensive than the average thing. But if we can get them down to being less expensive, the world itself is going to make the move. There will be a movement happening. Nobody's denying climate change. But
No.
I think we have to be very careful, and I agree with Jamali in this case that we can't be hypocrites to say to China and places like India, oh, you guys should stop polluting. We have to be tough on them when, again, we were dumping all our trash for hundreds of years on them for them to process. That's why the country, the Philippines got into a big tussle with Canada because Canada left all their garbage, like 3 tankers full of garbage in their country, and the president said, no, you take your garbage back. We're not dealing with it. And this whole thing went on for years. And I don't know how long that garbage has been there, but it was well over like 2
But that's the whole point. Do you see how I personally think like it's one thing to blame, but we ourselves, we don't even deal with our own waste disposal. That's to me is crazy.
I think trying to point the finger or blame is pretty useless at the end of the day. Anyways, it's just about, but there are certain areas where you can try to focus.
But we should have a better way because we should have a better way. We should, first of all, waste less. We need to change the model that we have here in the Western world. Our wants are endless, and as long as our wants exist, these people are going to produce. And that's what I'm saying in terms of a lot of these people produce shit they can't afford, and we will buy. Every year there's a new iPhone, there's a new Samsung that's coming out, and we're just consuming it. The new Jordans, there's new everything. New clothes, whatever it is, and it's coming from there.
If we didn't have that high demand,
it's more a problem with free market than anything else that you're talking about.
But it's also consumption. We consume a lot, and they produce what we want. So if we could manage that's also being obviously not marketed as much too. It's a big it's a plethora of issues that combine and creates this big monster. But I also think that we have to be understanding of as well as our role in it. Yeah, their bigger contribution of CO2 emit gas, but it's because of our wants. Most of it is because of our wants.
Yeah, because I think what you're getting into now is more so the psychological side of things outside of what the government can do, because so long as people want things and they can afford to get those things, they will buy those things.
And as a business owner, if you can build your product at a cheaper rate at X place and make more money off that product per sale, you're going to do it.
Right, but I mean, this ties back into what I was saying earlier in terms of protectionism. Like you see that happen in South Korea. For years, they invested in Hyundai, that's their brand, and they protect it. You want to get a BMW, it's going to cost you 7 times the price. So only few people get it. Like we have to build our own economy. They did the same thing with Samsung. Samsung's a very affordable brand there, but they protect their market. Whatever their country is innovative in, they protect it. I think here in Canada is like we want to practice the free market scale and come in and welcome to everybody. But we have to have something so that our economy could sit on. And we have some aspects of it, but like even with the oil sands, right out in Alberta, how much of our oil actually comes from there?
Very little.
Yeah,
it's sitting in the ground. We're importing it from the Saudis.
Thank you.
And, yeah.
That's like the problem, right?
And the amount of billions. I actually liked when Justin Trudeau said, I didn't enjoy him buying the pipeline when he campaigned that it was going to be privately built. But once he did actually have it, at one point he said, I'm going to build the pipeline and I'm going to take the money from the pipeline and invest it into green technologies and finding green technologies. And hearing that, I said, you know what? Now that's reasonable. That's a good idea. This guy's talking some real sense. Because that's the kind of money you're going to need to explore these green technologies first. Like put it on the table that the pipeline is the only way to bring in the kind of money you would need to explore those things. But then I looked at it a bit deeper and I was like, yeah, but you haven't even cracked the soil on your pipeline.
No.
Which means this plan that you just proposed is like, 10 years away? Like not even close to ever happening. So you won't even start in these green technologies because you don't have the money for it. So basically not a plausible solution. I think right now Max's solution of steering it like I tried to say to the private sector to give us some alternatives that'll make us make the decision ourselves instead of trying to tax the average Canadian, which I don't think is going to solve anything.
And it has to be affordable, like you said. And I think that's something that's really.
That's it. I was sitting in on a debate in the NDG. I'm also working on the EDA in NDG for their side, for the People's Party. I went to a debate, and all the parties were there, and somebody I've never met before, a person from the audience got up and asked, the Green Party was touting all night about how great they're doing in certain other countries in terms of their green aspects. Sure, I agree. I wish we could do better in certain aspects. And he mentioned Norway in specific was doing great. He was talking about getting rid of zero fossil fuels, using no fossil fuels whatsoever. And they said that if elected day one, they're going to start eliminating 100% the use of fossil fuels in Canada. Somebody came up and asked, they brought it up. I'm really glad they did because I didn't realize it. When I first heard it out of the Green guy's mouth, I said, hey, sounds like a good thing. The question was, I'm glad you brought up Norway and the fact that they don't use fossil fuels. Their average price per kilowatt of electricity, I think it was right now, is roughly 9 times the price of ours.
Yeah.
So the average Canadian cannot see a $60 bill turn into a $500 bill.
There you go.
Do you think this is a reasonable ask of the average Canadian in order to further your agenda of carbon dioxide emissions? And the Green Party looked him right in the eye and said, yes. He said, yes, 100%. This is a small thing that we have to give up in order to make some serious differences in the climate change. And I'm saying there, like, I don't know who you're talking to, but I can't afford $500 just to find out that you gave this speech in 1992. You're giving it again. You're taking more money from me, and 30 years from now, you're probably going to give me the same spiel and try to take it away from me more. Like, what's going on here?
It's a hustle, bro. I keep saying it. It's a hustle.
But to hear the Green Party directly say, when the numbers were figured, like, yes, that is not even relevant to us. We're going forward with our plan on green, and basically your pocket does not matter. Like, well, how am I going to get up and vote for you? I want to say, like, I'm green, like, I'm happy with the environment, idea, this and that, but I look at what you just said to me. How can I honestly get up and vote for you?
It's not sound to the average Canadian citizen who's going to hear that.
And then we say, listen, I see what you're proposing. Would you mind if we do a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis and what's going on? And, he's a climate denier. Don't talk to him. It's like, I don't know. I'm not seeing great alternatives out of the other parties right now. I think for a while we've been stuck picking the best of the worst.
Yeah.
I hope I presented you a couple interesting food for thoughts today.
Just the last question, though. You guys are planning to do something about the minimum wage? Because cost of living is going up across the country. You guys are gonna...
We have no direct...
We have literally took my last question.
We have no direct position as it sounds, or not that I know of, that he's made directly on it. I don't know if it's on his agenda to look at or not. I really don't. I wish I had an answer and I could tell you directly, but I really don't know if it's on his agenda or not. It's funny, though, earlier today I was reading up a little bit. I wish I had the guy's name. He's a really renowned economist. I think he was working with Harvard, but I'm not sure. And he was talking about how if you really want to raise up your minimum wage, you really have to have a conversation about the economics behind your immigration system. Right. Because if your minimum wage is the entry level, and we're talking the skills, the entry level,
right,
you can't be constantly flooding the market with more employees. If you're constantly flooding the market with options to keep things paying, why would that minimum wage go up? And it's not something that I'm backing 100%. It's not something I'm all over, but it's something that I was listening to an economist talk about it today, and like he didn't sound wrong. I'll look more into it, but he brought up a good argument. I don't have a position for the People's Party on raising it directly. If he comes out with one, I'll let you guys know what it is. But I think what I like about our leader is step one is going to be taking a long, hard look at it.
What about housing issues? Because, I mean, we see every summer here, at least in Montreal, the homelessness rate goes up a certain percentage, or even just property maintenance. And all
June and July, man.
I'm going to sound like a real jerk coming back to immigration, but when we receive mass amount of people, they're not diving into Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean and Abitibi-Témiscamingue.
No.
They're coming to Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and we're seeing a housing crisis, and prices are skyrocketing. It's another case of supply and demand.
No, but it's also an abuse of...
there's a lot of other things going on. Right, I agree 100%, but with our supply and demand the way it is, I don't see...
But it's what I'm also saying is that there's a lot of empty places. Just that I feel like the cost of housing right now is exponentially growing on basis that I've never seen before. And
It is, but I moved out in June. I think when I moved out, the houses in NDG were like at 0 and renting was at less than 1% of availability.
I don't think. Well, there's a lot of vacancy. There's
a lot of vacancy.
Affordable vacancy is the problem.
Affordable vacancy is a problem.
Because you don't want to rent a 3.5 for $1,400. Like who's making a salary that can
in that sense, and I couldn't agree more. I fully agree. I wish I had a more solid position to take that I could take directly from the platform. But I think even looking into that, I would look at it directly and start to wonder how much is if we're talking about a housing problem in rural Quebec or in Quebec, how much is that an issue of the average BC person or the average Alberta person? And in that sense, should it be their tax dollars that are paying towards the solution, or should this be a Quebec thing, a provincial thing, like you said? Should it be?
Well,
municipal?
I think it's
a shared. If it's a problem, we know it's a problem. It's definitely a shared.
Well, I mean, we see it across the board, right? We see what's going on in BC. Toronto is approaching a bubble. Montreal's not far behind. I think it's something. As much as I think you're right, it should be shared, but I think the provincial government should have a level position to impose changes or put in legislation to make sure that housing is affordable, especially in these large cities. Like when your visitors come, they're not going to Abitibi, Témiscamingue. They're coming to Montreal, and if you're coming to a place full of homelessness, it also affects on the quality of life within the city areas of Toronto, Montreal, wherever, Vancouver, and other places. I think that's something that should be addressed. Because
definitely. Well, I think the most in terms of the PPC and the most natural way that we can overcome that's equal to all Canadians is doing our part to lower the federal tax, put that difference directly back into your pocket, so as an individual you can make the decision whether you want to go to your grocery cart, whether you want to go to a bigger house, whether you want to go to a new car. At least the money's in your pocket and you get to decide what you're going to do with it.
But would you be lowering this before getting rid of the deficit or after the deficit?
We plan, on the numbers we looked at, we think we can balance the deficit in 2 years, which is very much faster than all the other parties put together. And as of 2 years, be able to drastically reduce the taxes for the average Canadian.
Cool. I see.
In reference, Justin Trudeau's planning north of $10 billion deficits for 4 years. The Conservatives can't plan to balance it within one term. They're hoping 2 terms, but they said right off the bat, maybe not. That could change. Greens and NDP, I don't even think they put numbers on the platforms that they put together or crunch the numbers to what they actually tell people they want to do. Because I look at a lot of it and economically doesn't really make sense. But really appreciate you guys having me. Hope I open some eyes. Hope everybody that listens to this knows that there's a new party on the table called the People's Party. Really hope everybody tunes into the National Leaders Debate on October 7th and 10th, I believe. That's where you get to see the leaders of each party go at it against each other. Should be interesting.
Definitely.
And there's a vote coming up on October 21st, so everybody should get out there and make their voices heard. Whether you agree with me or disagree, go out there and put it down on the ballot.
It's good, man. It's not.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I'm happy that you came through, and we were very happy to give you this platform to just talk about your party, because I know a lot of people may have heard of the People's Party but don't know essentially what is going on with them. Like I said, like even for myself, the bit I heard, I wanted you to just come in and just you sell it to me, like you give it to me and let me, from what you tell me, I'll go from there, And honestly, like I feel like you've answered everything we wanted to know from you. You didn't shy away from anything. You did what you had to do today, man. So I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate
Any
it
last
too.
thoughts from you guys?
No, man. I can't be a hypocrite and say go out and vote. It's not my thing. But I guess do what you got to do.
I can't say go out and vote, and like I tell people all the time, look, I don't care who you vote for, just go out and vote,
Yeah, man.
Do what's best for you, your family, and your future, man. All
Yeah,
right?
man. It was good that you came through. Appreciate it. We don't agree, but you know what? You have to listen to everyone. You have to listen to everyone's point of view. That's what counts.
Appreciate the time.
Yeah, man. Anytime.
So everybody that's in the live stream, thank you guys for watching, and to those who gave us questions, we appreciate that so much. As always, you guys can catch us on Instagram and on Twitter at Don't Be Mad Pod, and on the Facebook group, it's Don't Be Mad Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week.
Take care, everyone.
We out. Love is love.
Peace.